let's get one thing out of the way. This was a horrible, awful, terrible crime. And it was committed without any excuse whatsoever. And if nothing is remembered from what I say in the next few minutes, please understand, I'm not proffering any excuse. There is no excuse. None. What's going to happen now is that Craig is going to be held responsible. And he accepts that. You're going to hold him responsible. I can't even imagine, honestly, the suffering of this little girl's mother and her family. It takes our breath away, that kind of devastating loss. But you know, the law is very demanding. It's very strict about the state wanting to put one of our fellow citizens in a prison cell. And you know that because now you've heard the judge tell you about other options that you have a chance to consider other than first-degree murder. And really, here's the only issue. Is this really a case of a deliberate murder? That's it. Has the state proven beyond a reasonable doubt that this is cool reflection on the matter? Or is it something else? Is it an impulsive act, not coolly reflected upon? Is it a compulsion? I do want to point out to you before we talk about the evidence, when we're talking about deliberation, we're talking about the moment that Haley's killed, okay? Not afterwards, not the cover-up, okay? We talked a little bit with some of you anyway in jury selection last week about the drunk driver. You remember that? The guy who has a few too many beers and is driving home and crashes into a little boy on a skateboard who comes out between two cars because he's reaching for a beer instead of a brake. It doesn't matter to that little boy's family. That little boy's dead. What difference does it make whether he's intentionally killed or hit by a drunk driver? But the law treats those situations very differently. And as jurors, you're sworn to uphold the law. So what is the evidence of deliberation? What's the evidence of an impulsive act born out of a compulsion? Well, let's talk about the guns first. I got to admit to you, I honestly don't get it. If the goal is to be quiet, right? I don't even like to imagine the way children could be killed quietly. But we all live in the real world, and we all know there are quiet ways to do that don't involve guns, right? That makes no sense to me. I think it's just as likely, if not more likely, that the reason this .22 rifle's used is it happens to be leaning up against the back door of the basement stairs, right? I mean, if you're really wanting to be quiet, why are you shooting a gun at all? That's not something you'd have to do. And people are coming home. You're coming home at 5 o'clock, at 5:30. This selection of the gun thing, I don't get it. The stories, that makes more sense, right? These unbelievably disgusting, really disturbing stories that you had to read. This kind of repressed, intense desire for young teenage girls, I think it absolutely provides motive for the kidnapping and the rape and the sodomy, right? That just makes sense. But, you know, nobody in the stories are killed. The deliberation we're talking about here is about the murder. If you're actually got a plan, if there's a plan to rape and sodomize and murder this little girl, I don't see it. No disguise at all. None. They didn't even attempt, doesn't even wear his sunglasses. He drives down the street, back and forth. Carlos Edwards is out in the front yard. He's out in the front yard raking his leaves. And back and forth 5 times. And maybe Carlos is in the garage at the moment that Craig pulls up. But let's face it, it's pretty clear, isn't it, to all of us? I mean, he told us, his wife told us. He almost catches the truck. He is running at the top speed, trying to get this guy who just grabbed this little girl. And what's he doing? He's yelling at him, right? He's yelling, screaming at him. Stop it, you know? And the window's down. And so here's Craig Wood driving away with Haley in the car, and he's got to know, he knows, this guy's right behind him. And as soon as Carlos Edwards can get his wife on a telephone, there's going to be a 911 call. And he's driving his own truck. And still, he goes home. That sounds like compulsion. That's compulsion. I think the most revealing evidence that there's no plan, really, are the trips to the Walmart. How does that work? If this is the plan, we're going to grab a little girl and rape and sodomize her and kill her. What are you doing at the Walmart buying bleach and duct tape and laundry bags afterwards? Afterwards, right? If there's no forethought put into how to get rid of the body or what's going to happen afterwards, why do we think there's forethought ahead of the murder? Why would we think that? What's the proof of that? And you know, Mr. Patterson says, well, what about the shot to the back of the head? And I agree. Let's be crystal clear, okay? This thing about reckless, there's nothing reckless about that. A gun to the back of the head, that's on purpose. That's intentional. That's knowing. Her position at the time is pure speculation. They don't have a clue. He could have had the gun down low. We don't have any idea how that happened. But we do know it's not an accident, right? We know she isn't trying to escape and he shoots her. We know it's not a struggle. It's purposeful, no doubt. But that is not deliberation. That's not cool reflection. I mean, the truth is a lot of people get shot in the back of the head, not first-degree murder cases. They're not. I want to say something about the drugs. It's zero excuse, none, to use drugs and commit a crime. It's not a defense to any crime. It wouldn't be a defense to stealing a car, and it sure isn't a defense to murder. And I didn't introduce that to provide a defense. The only reason the drugs came up is because I thought you needed to know, how does this happen, Mr. Berrigan? The guy's 45 years old. Here he comes, no criminal record. He's been working in schools with kids, right? Junior high school, all these years. Not one single time, none, is there even one iota of a suggestion that he's got some interest in teenage girls. None. Of course the school would take action if they even thought for a second anything like that was going on. But it wasn't. So how do these demons that he's been suppressing for all these years, all of a sudden, on February the 18th of 2014, how do they get out? How does that happen, right? His friend Gary Turner, who comes in, he's known him all these years, doesn't know he's using methamphetamine. No idea. And you heard the police officers, one after the other, yeah, I've got training, and people who are intoxicated, people who use drugs. And I don't think he was on drugs. But nobody really asks him about drugs. They don't do any kind of testing about drugs. And the truth is, frankly, and you heard it yourself, they don't care about drugs. They see a meth pipe in the car up there near the dash, and they leave it there, right? They 3 weeks later, they get methamphetamine in a plastic baggie, and they do nothing. They do nothing with it. Why? Well, drugs just messes up their case. They don't want to talk about drugs. I can understand them. And they're not an excuse. Not an excuse. It's just an explanation. How did we get from this guy who gets along well with everybody in school, everybody seems to like him, to this? How does that happen? I'm going to sit down. I want to tell you that we appreciate the sacrifice you've made this week, being here. And I have every confidence you're going to go back and you're going to carefully deliberate about the evidence. Take your time. Even if you decide this is second-degree murder, you can impose a very, very long prison sentence. We can be done now. But you make that judgment. Whatever it is, you know that we trust and accept that decision.